Calling Yume Nikki influential almost feels like an understatement. It broke new ground in its scene, an RPG Maker game with almost no RPG elements. No combat, no puzzles, no dialogue. The only real RPG function it had was the inventory for your effects. It wasn't the first RPG Maker game to cast aside these traditional mechanics. Stuff like Azusa 3.9 predates it, and if we're just talking gameplay style, LSD Dream Emulator was pretty similar back in 1998. But Yume Nikki definitely popularized this style, and its influence can still be felt today in various RPG Maker games and more directly in the hundreds upon hundreds of fan games inspired by it. One of the major reasons for the sheer amount of these fan games is the engine Yume Nikki was created in, RPG Maker 2003. It's widely considered one of the most accessible engines ever made, designed so that anyone can try their hand at making a game. It's still not easy, but it's definitely more approachable than your average engine, though there's another engine I know of also designed for accessibility. Roblox is a lot of people's first experience creating a 3D game, and despite its relative ease of access, I still have no idea how to work this thing. But a lot of really cool people who are much smarter than I have made some great stuff using it, and with the sheer amount of content created with it, it's only natural that Roblox has a bunch of Yume Nikki fan games on it too. So I decided to make a video about them a while back, and now I'm going to talk about some more since I've hopefully gotten better at talking into a mic. Sun, Moon, and Star, to these I bid adieu, is a traditional Yume Nikki fan game. You start right in the Nexus, no bedroom or anything, you're just thrown straight into it. If you say what's the point of this game in the chat, you'll be set to a short intro sequence, which I can only assume is in the protagonist's bedroom. There's actually a couple of chat access worlds, the phrases are in the game's description, but they take you to the intro, trophy room, the debug room, and an arena? Yeah, there's a PvP minigame. All of these are just some fun bonuses, they can be ignored for the most part. The Nexus has 9 doors, 7 of which lead to worlds, and the other 2 leading to a credits room and some bonus worlds added in an April Fool's update, mostly just here to keep them accessible after the event ended. The worlds themselves are very diverse, sometimes they're cozy and wonderful, sometimes they're vaguely threatening, and sometimes it actually feels like some weird shit you'd find in like 2012 Roblox. Occasionally they'll have an objective, like collecting stars to unlock a badge. Badges serve as the effects of this game, finding them can sometimes unlock items that might help you with exploring, or maybe it'll just be something fun to goof around with. You only start with the Way Home, a pistol that takes you back to the Nexus when you fire it. Weird choice for a way to wake up. I don't know if it's the sound waking you up or if there's a darker implication here. Also, it still works as a gun. Some of these puzzles to unlock effects are simple. Grab this hammer and take it to this door, but some of them are really convoluted and complex. If you listen to this dude's monologue, he lets you use his time machine. This leads you through a bunch of shorter worlds going further back through Roblox's history. If you go to this part in the build server, you find a teleport. This takes you to a birthday party. Make a bridge out of people, talk to this guy for a burger, give it to this person and they give you a quarter, look at this dude's PSP, write down the colors because it's randomized each server, go to this edge of the map, drop down to the cave entrance on the side, navigate to the end of the cave, climb up here, sneak through this extremely discreet gap and get the keycard, come back to the arcade machine, input that color combination from earlier, go down through this laboratory, sneak in here, hit this button to open this door, press this panel, climb this truss, press this button on the computer, get the cake, take it across your bridge of people, give it to this kid at the table, and congrats! You got one effect. This is just so unintuitive, I really have no idea how people found some of these. How did I find it? Well, simple. I asked other people. This game isn't super active, but occasionally you'll bump into strangers, and everyone I met was really friendly and either willing to set me on the right track or just outright show me how to get the badges I was missing. And occasionally people would ask me for help and I'd show them what others had shown me. There's no YouTube guides on how to get effects, no Discord server to ask questions in, and no wiki. I doubt a lot of people will figure out these puzzles on their own, so you'll have to resort to asking others. I've got mixed feelings on this approach. On one hand, it makes getting the ending without assistance very difficult unless you're committed to spending tens of hours exploring and doing trial and error until you make any kind of progress. But also, meeting random people and exploring for badges with them is fun, and it almost felt incentivized by design. It really feels like a way to take advantage of the fact that the game is always online. Alright, quick addendum, I wrote that part of the script over a year ago. There is stuff like YouTube guides now, and a wiki, though it's very bare bones at the time of recording. But I'm keeping this part in because I really want to drive home how difficult and convoluted some of these puzzles can be. And that birthday puzzle is required for the ending. Some of the optional badges are even more confusing, like throwing a ball into this corner until something happens. I don't know if there's a specific spot you need to hit or if it's RNG or what, but I have no idea how people figured this one out. I've only talked about puzzle badges, but some can be frustrating from a gameplay perspective too. To unlock the skateboard, which is the speed effect of this game, you need to do a similarly complex puzzle, and then play what is the Roblox equivalent of Desert Bus, just so I can move a little faster. I never actually did this one. I helped test this badge and it spawned me at the wrong end, so I've never had to do the challenge. That's right, I'm a fraud. Sun, Moon, and Star is definitely one of the larger Yume Nikki fan games on the platform. There is a lot of worlds to find. Even after getting the ending, there's stuff I've only seen for the first time while editing this video. The game does have a lot of stuff that kinda banks on nostalgia, more so than just having the old Roblox aesthetics. It's got a lot of worlds that are directly based off of old games. Hell, Yorick's resting place is just a world you can find. I'm sure there's people who love this kind of stuff, but it was just a bit immersion breaking for me. Now, it does serve a purpose. Nostalgia is one of the main themes explored in Sun, Moon, and Star, tying it to the themes of memories and reminiscence. But when you drop me into Cartwright into Annoying Orange, yeah, it's a little hard to take seriously. Which does the game a bit of a disservice because it explores some genuinely meaningful concepts. The description reads, "The curtains draw to the conclusion of a life wonderfully lived in everyday bliss." Sun, Moon, and Star, To These I Bid Adieu, is a game about someone at the end of their life reminiscing on their past through the distorted haze of surrealist imagery. At least, that's how I interpret it, and I like to try and analyze this game through that lens. It helps me find meaning in places that might not even have an intended purpose. Some people are going to call me pretentious for this, and you're probably right, but I don't care, because it's always more fun searching for your own meaning in media, even if it wasn't the author's intent. The game has a lot of inspiration from, and allusions to, other works, an example being the beach world modelled after the cover of No Summer, No Cry, an album that contrasts its mostly upbeat chiptune songs with more somber, melancholic tracks, similar to how Sun, Moon, and Star jumps between silly internet humour and bleak, empty worlds. Another game that does this is Omori, with its wacky Earthbound stuff and horror segments, which I only bring up because No Summer No Cry was created by the composer for Omori's soundtrack. Look at that, full circle. That's another game inspired by Yume Nikki. Yeah, now it's all coming together. I'm not going to talk about every connection I could try and make, but something that had undeniable influence on Sun, Moon, and Star is the visual novel Subarashiki Hibi, also known as Wonderful Everyday. It's got worlds pretty heavily inspired by locations in Subahibi, and that quote from earlier is probably a nod to the English translation of the title. There's badges named after chapters from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and its sequel Through the Looking Glass, which I thought would be referencing those books, but no, Subahibi's chapters borrow their titles from that series, so this is a reference to a reference. There's a bunch of smaller connections all over the game, and I'm sure they're very important to Sun, Moon, and Star's themes, but my analysis is going to be pretty shallow. I haven't read Subahibi, so my understanding of it might be a bit iffy. I'm not that into visual novels, and that shit's like 50 hours long, so I'm not going to read it just for this video. But from what I gather, it's about a lot of things, most of which I'm probably not allowed to talk about on a Roblox video. But there's one message I see repeated constantly in my research. Live happily. Applying this to Sun, Moon, and Star, it leads me to believe that the message of the game is to live life happily, so that when it ends, you can look back on your memories without regret, and that means coming to terms with mistakes you've made in the past. But it's never that easy. Subahibi knows that, Sun, Moon, and Star knows that, and odds are you know that too. The battle for happiness is tough, but it's a struggle we all have to face at one point or another. Or maybe I'm totally wrong. Not all intertextual references have meaning, and once again, I haven't read Subarashiki Hibi, so there's probably tons of stuff I'm missing. But if you've read it, you might pick up on some connections and thematic parallels that I didn't, because there is a lot, and I feel like a damn lunatic trying to piece this game together. After obtaining a few important badges, you can go to the trophy room to access the ending. It's a really good sequence, actually one of my favorites. I'd love to talk about it and share my interpretation of it, but I won't. I highly recommend trying to reach it yourself, and I don't want to spoil that experience for you. But it doesn't end there. Sun, Moon, and Star received a sequel of sorts with Knockin' on Heaven's Gate. Instead of a branching map, Heaven's Gate has one main area that connects to a bunch of shorter areas. This hub is just a bunch of objects scattered around randomly. I bet I could green screen it to something funny though. Each zone can be explored once per playthrough, then after exploring all of them, you can be taken to the ending sequence. This game operates on the narrative that every world was created by an AI, basing them off of other games and events, both real and fictional. This makes it less jarring when I see something so clearly based off of old internet culture, because of course an AI would do that, it's just regurgitating stuff off the internet. Something I love is that the game remembers what world you're in, so if you disconnect and come back, it doesn't set you back to the Nexus, it keeps you exactly where you left off. You can only access each area once per playthrough, so I abused this to beat this part by Alt F4ing whenever I fell. There's nothing past here, by the way, the game straight up tells you that there's no point to it. Heaven's Gate focuses a lot more on the backstory of its protagonist. It gives some insight to their history through its endings, which I will also not be showing. Go play it for yourself. Sun, Moon, and Star, To These I Bid Adieu is a bizarre and wonderful game. It's not the most polished experience, but it doesn't have to be. What's important is that it gave me some interesting things to see and think about, and if you can put up with some of the most convoluted puzzles I've ever seen, it's a pretty high recommendation from me. Before I move on, I want to quickly talk about another game. Something Somewhere shares a lot of similarities with Sun, Moon, and Star. I'll talk more about it later, but for now I'll say that if you like one of these, odds are you'll like the other, so check them both out. A lot of people really wanted me to play Dream Game on my other video, and it makes sense. It's one of the most popular Yume Nikki Fangames on Roblox. Its visit count second only to Dream World. The truth is, I already had played it. I just didn't really like it. So I planned to do a short segment on why I didn't enjoy it and then move on to another game. But when I went back to record footage, I found out I'm a lot more mixed on this game than I initially thought, and I ended up having a lot more to say than I originally planned. Sun, Moon, and Star, to these I bid adieu, is a Yume Nikki fan game that takes heavy aesthetic influence from old Roblox, and Dream Game is a Yume Nikki fan game that takes heavy aesthetic influence from old Roblox. On the surface, they have a lot in common, but they both go about this concept in very different ways. Sun, Moon, and Star was heavily ingrained with the internet culture of the time, while Dream Game only follows the general aesthetic style of old Roblox, with the blocky worlds and stud textures and such. For lack of a better word, it feels very authentic. Hell, some worlds are even based off the creator's own games from back in the day. I really like the visual style. It's simple, yet can still be very beautiful. Dream Game doesn't open to just a bedroom. You have a whole house and island you can explore. I usually prefer when the protagonist's reality is a smaller slice of the world. I'm a sucker for that classic bedroom and balcony, but I really love Dream Game's Windy Island. It's pretty expansive and detailed with wildlife and occasional events like sailors visiting. It even has a day-night cycle and different seasons for when you wake up. This is a non-traditional fan game, meaning it doesn't follow the same formula as Yume Nikki. As opposed to having a nexus, you sleep and awaken in a random selection of worlds from a small pool. This really put me off of the game initially. Randomized worlds makes exploring at your own pace hard because instead of the player deciding where to explore, the game decides for you. The game also doesn't teleport you to other servers when you enter a new world. It unloads the area and loads in the dream worlds. This saves having to connect to a new server every time you move worlds, but it also means everyone in the server has to be on the same world at the same time. So in multiplayer, sleeping is dictated by a server vote. This whole system just makes playing in public servers pretty clunky, and the devs even recommend playing alone or with friends in a private server. Which are free, by the way. In a normal Yume Nikki fan game, you'd search these worlds for connections to other worlds, but Dream Game isn't about that. It features worlds much larger than your average Yume Nikki fan games, but has less connections. These surface dreams do have connecting worlds, but they have a weird knowledge check beforehand too. You need to use the mysterious crystal on one of these orbs. This will set a destination for when you next sleep. So you use it on the orb, wake up, and then the next time you sleep you'll wake up in a new location. The issue is that the crystal can only be obtained from the pink swamp. So if I want to go to any dream below the surface, I have to sleep and wake up until I chance upon the pink swamp, and then if I have a specific dream I want to go to, I have to sleep and wake up until I just so happen to find that one. If you're unlucky, you'll sometimes be spending upwards of 5 minutes clicking this button praying the game will take you where you want to go. I see this as Dream Game's biggest flaw. Having randomized worlds seems okay at first, but it quickly becomes frustrating. There's lots of areas dependent on bringing items between several dreams, so you'll spend a lot of time cycling through the worlds looking for what you want. Alright, I need to add another addendum. It turns out there is a way to get the worlds you want. There's 3 ponds around the island that you can change the color of, and inputting certain codes will force their corresponding worlds to appear. If you change sulfur to green, dice to blue, and eye to pink, you'll force the pink swamp to appear next time you sleep. These accent colors can make it kinda hard to tell though. I imagine colorblind people would really struggle with this. It sounds like it would fix the RNG issue, and it definitely helps, although it's very long and tedious. But the problem is the game doesn't tell you about it! Nowhere does the game mention or even hint at what these ponds do, let alone what codes to input. There really should have been a way of communicating this to the player. Not a whole tutorial or anything, but they probably could have had a note around the house that shows off the symbols and maybe their connection to sleeping or something. Then in the dreams, maybe you could hide the codes by leaving colored symbols around in their respective worlds, so the player would piece together that maybe using that color combination on the pond would do something, and it would make a pretty satisfying puzzle. Or you could just have a nexus, that'd work too. This game really lacks clarity for a new player. In my first time playing, I had a myriad of questions. Is there deeper dreams? What do any of these items do? Why can't I examine anything? What the hell does Psy Drain Shock Take Damage 20 mean? I'm still not sure on that last one. I think it damages you for switching items too quickly, but why though? Was this to stop an exploit or something? I can't do what I did in Sun, Moon, and Star and ask others for help either, unless you're willing to jump into a public server and hope everyone is willing to cooperate with you. It has an info command, but it doesn't help much aside from directing you to the wiki. The wiki is pretty fleshed out, but I really don't like using these on my first playthrough of a game. If I ever get hard stuck early in a Yume Nikki fan game, I usually look up how to get the speed effect and then get back to exploring on my own. So I looked up how to get Dream Game's closest thing to a speed effect, the net. You need to go to Tenmo and jump into this orb, input 1337 into the numpad, crowbar out, go to this teleporter, grab the pie, get to the ocean, and walk around the map until you find a big fish robot thing. But you can't swim, how do I get out there? I'm dead serious. Yeah, pies get stuck on the surface of the water and you can stand on them. This really feels like an exploit, but no, this is the developer-intended way to access the boat. You build a bridge out of pies. Pie hiking, as it's called, is necessary to get almost anything done in this game. So you bridge out to the- shit. You walk around the map, you find the fish, you bridge out, and then you talk to this guy and he gives you a permanent net and pie. After this, I wasn't going to try and figure stuff out by myself. External resources are a necessity to get anything done, since the game itself doesn't make any attempt to explain crucial mechanics to the player. But after committing to using the wiki, this game got pretty good. Once you're not bogged down by not knowing what the hell is going on, exploration becomes pretty enjoyable. Though ideally the game itself would give a little tutorial on things like pie hiking and how the mysterious crystals work. I don't want them to streamline it completely, the lack of instruction is pretty integral to the genre, but Yume Nikki could get away with a lack of information because you interact with the world in pretty simple ways. You only ever really interact with objects and occasionally use an effect to solve a puzzle. And even then it gives you this little infographic at the start. Dream Game doesn't really have any explanations like this, it just drops you in and tells you to figure it out, which is frustrating because the way you interact with the world, even at a basic level, is pretty complex. It's like if I wanted to open this door, but first I need to do my taxes. Actually, now that I think about it, why does the game make me get the mysterious crystals at all? Why does the game feel the need to make me waste my time getting it before I can start exploring properly? Just let me touch the orbs to trigger them. I've been pretty negative up until now, so I'll talk about what I like for a change. Once you get over the hurdle of strange knowledge checks and RNG mechanics, the world is very intriguing and fun to explore. Of course, I talked about how I like the visuals, but surprisingly, Dream Game has a story. It's explained pretty vaguely, not so much in the way that most of these games do it, where you have to theorize and speculate most of it. Dream Game's story has already happened before you showed up, and it's up to the player to find the pieces and put together the lore. It's got a lot of ties to astrology and philosophy and whatnot, which I won't really go into. It's a bit beyond the scope of this video. The protagonist of this game is an actual character too, Nashtara Bealdhild, who has her own history and some cool details like custom voice acting for certain sound effects. The world building is decent too, there's characters, organizations, religion, and it really starts to blur the line between the dreams and reality. Some of the events and mechanics are great too. I love how if your stud balance goes negative, Mafia goons show up to collect your debt. There's different types of them and some have unique abilities, like the mugger stealing part of your avatar every hit. There's an event where you talk to this guy and get stuck fighting against a clone of yourself, but if you do a side area you can find his hat and you get a different scene instead. But I still had Guardia in Exile from back in like 2012, and putting it on my avatar still gave me the badge even though I didn't do the side area. So yeah, I'm a fraud again. Dream Game also has two companion pieces, The Forge and the Crucible, which is a sandbox exploration game, and Ghostwrite, which is an RPG. I'm not going to go into detail on them, but I thought it was worth mentioning if you want to check them out. I've been very conflicted on Dream Game. I can see why it's beloved by so many, but it just isn't for me. I can only really recommend it if you're someone who can frequently refer to a wiki and not have that diminish their enjoyment of a game, and I'm just not that kind of person. Maybe I went into it with the wrong mindset. I was expecting a Yume Nikki fan game, but Dream Game has a lot more in common with something like an ARG. Of course it's not an ARG, there's no alternate reality part, it's just a G? But it still has a similar formula where a group of people have to come together to solve extremely convoluted puzzles. Maybe the reason nothing is explained to the player is because they want to create an environment where online discussion is the only way to progress and foster a community of passionate players searching for clues in the most obscure of places. And if that was the goal, they definitely succeeded. Hell, while I was working on this video, the community found a world that requires a server to be up for 3 days and has a colossal list of requirements to enter, which is something nobody could find alone. I'm honestly surprised it was found at all, even with a team. I feel like Roblox is one of the best places to do something like this. In the modern day, games get cracked open and dissected mere days after release, but it's significantly harder to do something like that with a Roblox game, at least to my knowledge. If that sounds interesting to you, definitely give Dream Game a shot, but if you go in looking for something similar to Yume Nikki, you might be a bit disappointed. Oh yeah, and one more thing. I usually don't like having to explicitly state this kind of stuff, but since this is a Roblox video, I predict my audience might skew a bit younger, so I gotta make sure my intentions are clear. This segment isn't an attack on anyone who likes the game, and especially not an attack on the developers. Just because I wasn't a fan of something doesn't mean you aren't allowed to like it. I know a lot of people who love this game, and that's great, don't let me stop you from enjoying it. And I have nothing but respect for everyone involved in development. Have you ever tried making a game? That shit's hard! It's really easy to get stumped in development, and I've known so many devs who just abandon their projects before release. So the fact that Dream Game not only released to the public, but that they've been supporting it for over 3 years now is absolutely worthy of praise in of itself. So good job to everyone on the team. Hey, remember Vizar from my last video? It was one of my highest recommendations, and one of my favorite Yume Nikki fan games not just on Roblox, but of all time. It got a big update after that video, with one of the major features being a long line of events you could trigger, creating a sort of enclosed plotline. It was really cool. I wasn't too big on the writing, but having a story that takes place across a bunch of otherwise unrelated worlds is a great idea. It's like a little quest line. It even added some new gameplay elements to old worlds, like this horror segment at the hospital. The beautiful visuals contrasted with the somber atmosphere perfectly captures why Vizar is so special to so many people, and I would recommend revisiting Vizar for the Ember quest line, but I can't. You can't play it anymore. Some stuff happened, and I won't get into the specifics of it, but as of August 13, Vizar has been closed to the public, most likely to never be reopened. Now, this would be the part of the video where I tell you that if you find something really cool on the internet, download it, because there's no guarantee it'll be up forever. But Roblox isn't something that this can be done with, so Vizar will unfortunately be lost to time. I was wondering after Vizar closed if there would ever be another game like it, one that would capture me the same way it did. Luckily, I didn't have to wait long. After the closing of Vizar, some of the former devs went on to create their own game. The thing I want to get out of the way early is that Project Somnia is still very early in development. It released in what was basically a debug mode, where you would start with all effects and had to teleport around using the dev menu because most worlds weren't connected yet. But there was a major update while I was editing that hooked up most of the worlds and made the save files work, so it's a lot more functional as a game now. Something I should note is that the game does not auto-save. You have to manually use the save button in the menu, so don't forget that. This game is really impressive on a technical level. Of course, the worlds themselves are beautifully designed and modeled, but what took me by surprise was, funnily enough, the loading system. Because of some programmer wizardry, all of Project Somnia takes place on one server. This means transitioning between areas happens almost instantly without needing to create a new instance every time you move worlds. I love this, it's honestly one of the best parts of the game for me. Not needing to wait around for Roblox to make a new server means exploring is much smoother, and it helps make it a far more immersive experience. It also means everyone in the server can use the same chat without being in the same world, and gives the player some instant feedback when they touch a teleporter. This is a bit of a tangent, but more games need to tell me when I touch a teleporter. Often in other games I find myself touching one without knowing and then having no idea what teleported me, or touching something that I think will teleport me and then it doesn't. I find myself opening the console to check in these games, which totally pulls me out of the experience. If you're a developer, consider adding something to let the player know that they're about to teleport. Whether it be a loading screen, sound effect, or even a message doesn't matter, as long as it can communicate to the player that they're about to be taken somewhere. Though, there's a problem I have with Project Somnia's teleports. All of them are on a prompt. It makes sense for stuff that requires interaction, like an arcade cabinet and doors and such, but some things should really just be triggered by walking through them, like this archway or open hallways. I thought this might be because of how the loading system works, but there's actually a few activated by touch, which only adds to my confusion. Project Somnia's original worlds are all pretty sweet. Similar to its predecessor, it doesn't focus much on horror, but it doesn't shy away from the occasional scare. The reason I said original worlds is because the devs who worked on Vizar have made an effort to port over their worlds from that game to here. You can really tell that some worlds weren't created with this new loading system in mind. Terrain-heavy worlds can take pretty long to load, Arch Savannah specifically lags like crazy, but the fact that we can see these worlds again at all is nothing short of a miracle. Even if it means I have to walk through Neon Labyrinth again. Having multiple creators really lets it show off a variety of different styles and ideas. Serenity, surrealism, sanctity. I should mention that this game is open to contributions. You, the person watching, could submit a world and have it implemented into Project Somnia. If you're interested in that, there's more info in the Discord server. The scale here is massive too. There's like 80 worlds total, and by the time this video goes up there's probably more, though unfortunately there's no world list. You can see a counter on your save file, but I prefer the old list style. Like the rest of the game, the protagonist's house is beautifully constructed, though I wish it had a day-night cycle, purely because the alarm clock on PC uses your computer's local time, so it'll be broad daylight despite the clock saying it's 4 AM. It'd be cool if day and night were determined by the real time, like okay look, there's probably a way better comparison I could make, but I can only think of Pokemon Black 2. The PC has a pretty cool feature, there's not a lot to do with it, but it looks great and has a fully playable Minesweeper. I hope they lean into its mechanics a little more. Something like the unlockable wallpapers from Tuki would be cool. Maybe a world list would fit in here nicely. I'm not a big fan of the Nexus, it's just some doors and pillars, but they do plan to add a dream version of the house in an update. My main problem is the music. It's a bit loud and jarring. I'd prefer if it was a more subtle, ambient track. Though I do love how the doors look, and they all have different sound effects, which is a small but nice detail. It makes me wish the Nexus music was quieter so you could hear it better. They also re-added dynamic footstep sounds while I was editing. This kind of invisible design stuff is really cool to me because this level of detail is pretty uncommon to see on Roblox. It's got the gameplay you'd expect from a Yume Nikki Fangame, exploring worlds and collecting effects with some occasional puzzle solving and a little bit of platforming. The effects are pretty good all around. You've got your staples, speed effect, light effect, 12 returns, which I'm very happy about, but I particularly love the ancient terminal. You can use it to connect to structures and bring up a console. From this console you can execute a bunch of commands, like turning on and off lights and opening and closing gates, or communicating with a floating brain. It's an interesting way to give an effect multiple uses by making it entirely depend on the context. This segment's a bit shorter because I don't have a ton to say, but I just wanted to get the word out about this game. Even in its early days, Project Somnia is a very polished and ambitious project. Check it out, odds are it's gotten an update or two since I started editing this video, so there's probably stuff I didn't get to cover. Alright, so last time I did a little montage of a bunch of other games at the end, but this time I'm going to do a shorter overview of a few that I want to recommend but couldn't write a full segment for, starting with Something Somewhere. It's a really pretty game, taking full advantage of the old Roblox aesthetics. There's a handful of frustrating puzzles and events, especially for the ones that unlock the speed effects, but overall it's great. The bedroom is so comfy. You can interact with the lights, which is always a plus in my books. There's a custom chair animation, and the AC emits a low hum amidst the dim lighting. It's little details like this that go a long way in making a space feel dynamic and alive, especially the sound design. You can interact with the mirror to see an artwork of the protagonist too. No in-game model though. The worlds are pretty cool. Its old Roblox aesthetic is definitely apparent, but it experiments with it enough to keep it feeling original. The effects are pretty good too, and the puzzles to unlock them can be fun. Human genome can go to hell though. Devs should stop putting the speed effect behind the most complicated stuff. This might just be me, but I think the speed effect should be in places the player might stumble into while walking around, and these long and convoluted puzzles should have something more unique hidden behind them. Before Humanity. The visuals are definitely what stand out the most, with the beautiful structures and unique NPC artworks. It leans more to the atmospheric side than horror, but will occasionally throw something grotesque your way. Interestingly, this game lets you speak with NPCs, and with the use of effects, read their thoughts, a la Dreamnail. It seems to have its own story to tell, with history and events being mentioned by the characters, but the dialogue is a recent addition, so we'll have to wait and see where that goes. B.Zone. A nice little experience with an isometric view and an adorable little bee fella. It's pretty small at the moment, but it's very polished and full of charm. My only complaint is that every time you wake up, you have to watch this little intro cutscene again. Cherry Tree. Another small game, although it's gotten a lot of updates while I was working on the script. It's pretty sweet, but I'm not too huge on the custom character. I think the model looks fine, but the way it animates is a bit wonky. I think it's just using the default R6 animations, so the arms don't hinge at the shoulders, and it just kinda looks a bit off. I love the art on the NPCs though, and the worlds are pretty nice all around. Rulost, or maybe it's read as Are You Lost? Either way, I'm stretching the definition of a Yume Nikki fangame to get this on the list, because it's not explicitly inspired by Yume Nikki, and it has stuff like turn-based RPG combat. But it has a similar exploration structure, so I feel that fans of it will get a kick out of this regardless. Also, it's made by Budorkby, which you might know from that game. Or that other game. The Single Scarlet Poppy in a Field of Stars. I bet that title card looks terrible. Maybe I should have used one of the game's images instead. Anyway, I'm adding this segment last minute because I only heard about this game like a week before I planned to finish the video. It's got everything you'd expect from a Yume Nikki fangame, but it does a lot to differentiate itself. The first thing that stuck out to me was the loading screens on the Nexus doors being unique for each world, which is such a nice detail. You have a menu you can open too, which shows your health, a portrait of your character that reacts to the world you're in, and sometimes they'll have something to say about the world too. It's interesting, it separates the protagonist from the usual silent leads we see in these games, but without going too far in the other direction with full dialogue trees or anything. I'm not sure what VBM stands for, but I gather it's some kind of mental battery, being higher when the protagonist is happy or excited, and lower when they're upset or scared. My only problem with the game is that the text scroll is pretty slow, but aside from that minor gripe, I think this game is really good. Alright, I realized that overviewing every game would take way too long, and this video is long enough as is, so I'm just gonna list all the others I didn't have time to talk about. Unknown Memories, Displacement and Destination, Escapism Area, Greater Than Home, The Dream Core, Detachment, Dreams of Bombshells, Inner Mind, Station, Sweet Dream, Utopia of Unconscious, Ether, Home of the Gods, Deluge, Grey, Core of Dreams, Edge of the Atmosphere, Wandering, Petrified Dreams, 18th Checkpoint, and this list is probably nowhere near comprehensive. There's just so much to cover. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a fair few games that just flew completely under my radar. There's stuff like Super's Dreams and Yume Natsu created in Blockade, which for those who don't know, Blockade is an engine created in Roblox. That's right, we've got engines within engines. If you're struggling to find any of these games I just listed because of Roblox's horrible search engine, I'll have links somewhere in the description. Also, since I love the multiplayer aspect of this engine, I'd be remiss not to mention YNOproject.net, which is a collection of online browser ports of some RPG Maker fan games. It actually launched while I was making that first video, so I didn't get to talk about it there, but I definitely recommend it to fans of these games. It's also a perfectly good way to play these games for the first time with the use of single-player mode, since all of the ports are quite high quality. Everything you saw in this video from an RPG Maker fan game I recorded off of YNOproject.net. That's right. Somehow the multiplayer browser port of Yume Nikki is more stable than the Steam version. But honestly, you can find Yume Nikki fan games just about anywhere. RPG Maker, Roblox, Eduk32, fucking Google Slides, the possibilities are endless. These games are almost like a sketchbook, just thoughts someone had and put together in a playable collage. The perfect embodiment of creativity. It doesn't have to be polished, it doesn't have to make sense, you just have an idea and then create something out of it to get it out to the world. And whether you intend to or not, it's going to have meaning to some people. It's not going to appeal to everyone, but it doesn't have to. Whatever you create will hold some value to someone, and hey, I think that's pretty special. Hey, thanks for watching. This will probably be the only time I ever ask this on this channel, but if you like the video, consider subscribing. I kinda hate when people ask for subs, I think it takes away from the video a little bit, but I wanna know if it does anything. Anyway, this video was a long time coming. I started it like a year and a half ago, then scrapped it, then revisited it and just worked on it in the background of my other videos. It underwent a lot of rescripts, and I could have written more, but I had to call it at some point because I realized I'm never finishing this video if I don't. But yeah, it's finally done. Hope you enjoyed. Don't expect a Volume 3 anytime soon. Unless some new fan games come out that absolutely blow me away, I'll probably just stick to regular reviews. Oh, but I do plan to do a full video on Dreamworld once it gets a full release, or at least an ending, which actually got announced while I was editing, so that might be sooner than I thought. I feel like I didn't really do that game justice in my first video, so I want to do a deep dive into it, but I'll wait until it's done to share my thoughts and interpretations on it. Anyway, I've rambled long enough. Thanks for watching. Peace. You're still here? Okay then, time for something different. I really like 3D platformers, and the best ones find a way to make the character just feel fun to move around. And since Yume Nikki fan games mostly consist of just moving around, I thought a hybrid of the two would be pretty cool, and so far this hasn't happened, but Pseudo Regalia is the closest we're gonna get. It's this N64 style platformer which takes place mostly in these dreamlike locations. It's one of the best 3D platformers I've played in recent memory, and I've been using the soundtrack from it all over this video, so I thought I'd just throw in a quick recommendation at the end. Also, the game's like $8, come on, you can find that money between your couch cushions. Alright, that's all I gotta say. See ya.